we are in conflict, we have to be able to pick our battles, right? And so there has to be a climate of trust and open communication. You have to be able to trust and know that the other person you're having a conflict with is not the worst person in the world. Have you ever found yourself in a heated argument with somebody you deeply, deeply love and care about, and you wished that you knew the best way to navigate through it? Hi, I've been there. And today we are talking about navigating conflict. Many times we go into our own cocoon and we think we are being wronged and we think me, 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 me. And I want you to think, how else can we operate in this relationship container where there's two people? You want to be able to first acknowledge each person's way, their attachment style, and how you can best serve for the greater good of the relationship. We have quite the episode for you. And we're unpacking this simply because Ajit and we have gone into our 7 years of marriage. We talked a lot today about navigating conflict, what to do in the different attachment styles. So avoidant attachment, anxious attachment, and the 5 trauma responses, as well as what it looks like to fully collaborate in relationship. What tends to happen when you are coercive and or when you collapse, and how do we have healthy solutions where all parties are acknowledged. If you are coming from a place that's triggered, if you are coming up from a place that's heated, where the argument is big and you lost your temper, you have to be able to self-regulate. You have to be able to manage your emotions. And what does that look like? Have you ever found yourself in a heated argument with somebody you deeply, deeply love and care about, and you wished that you knew the best way to navigate through it? Well, I've got a surprise for you, because today we are diving into all things the art of moving through conflict and how we can come out even stronger on the other side. Hi, I'm Dr. Neeta, and this is your oasis. You've come to the Brave Table, your destination to be all things just a little bit more brave in your actions, in your relationships, and in your life. And today we are talking about navigating conflict. Oof, this is juicy. This is brave. It's courageous. When have you gotten into a fight, a argument with a partner, with your loved one, with a family member, maybe with your child, maybe with a sibling, somebody that you love? And then maybe you don't talk to each other for a couple days, you have the silent treatment, or it blows up in your face completely, or maybe even worse, you say things that you don't necessarily mean. Hi, I've been there. And if this is the first time you're tuning in, welcome. We have quite the episode for you. And we're unpacking this simply because I think I shared a couple of weeks ago, and if you are new, I just want to say welcome. A couple of weeks ago, how Ajit and we have gone into our 7 years of marriage. And I will link that episode in the show notes so you all can hear about that, where Ajit is on the Brave Table. And it had been 2 years since we had him on the Brave Table podcast. And we talked about the things that led to kind of our 7 years together. And we just recently came back from a beautiful, wild, amazing, incredible, and extraordinary couples retreat. And we were shepherded and guided by 8 other couples. So there were 9 couples, including ourselves. And it was the first time we weren't actually teaching anything. We were met with other couples who were also incredible, who had a lot of longevity in their relationships. Some were together for more than 35 years. Some had adults as their children. Some had different kinds of dynamics in relationships. Some had been divorced from 20 years of marriage and then found their forever love. I mean, the experience was vast, was different, but everyone had a intention. And the intention was you had to be committed to each other in a monogamous relationship, and you were proclaiming love with your partner. And I thought this was so unique because for the first time, it was a very intimate environment. And we are also mirroring with other couples. And we don't necessarily get to do that. And so I thought this was a beautiful break, of course, from our kids as well, but also pouring into ourselves. Like, I know that if you're on the break table, you probably prioritize your own growth. And Ajit and I, we prioritize our own individual self growth. And I think you've heard me mention a few times here, many times, if you've been following me for a while, that in relationship, in partnership, we have to be able to grow relationally, meaning that your relationship becomes a third entity. And that's what this beautiful concoction of this couples retreat was all about, how to really cultivate the next 7 years. And in order to really do that, we got into some juicy topics like conflict, because who doesn't fight in relationship? And the idea here is not that we're going to avoid conflict altogether. No, we're still going to be able to fight. And actually, healthy couples do fight. And I will share my recent solo cast about navigating that in partnership. And that is actually okay. But what tends to happen is when we get into a powerful partnership relationship and when you are getting into a fight with somebody, well, the idea that you want to land with is hopefully collaboration, because at the end of the day, people that have strong negotiation skills and or emotional intelligence will be able to navigate through. Don't get me wrong, even the best of us lose our shit sometimes. Even the best of us, we get into our patterns of how we had to solve conflict or navigate through conflict when we were children or when we were growing up. And many times we have a trauma response. So, in our trauma response, do we fawn? Do we flight? Do we fight? Do we avoid, run away, fly away? Or do we freeze? In other words, do we collapse? Now, one of the things that came up in this beautiful container for 3.5 days was there is someone that can actually coerce or manipulate to get their way in an argument, in a conflict. Now think, was there ever a time where you got into a conflict with somebody that you love or somebody you admire and respect? Doesn't have to be a love partner. It could be anybody. And you felt that, oh, okay, wow, they're just sharing their needs. And you acquiesced. The other person maybe bulldozed or shared something which you probably thought was so profound, but then were your needs met at the end of it? No. Did you have resentment at the end of it? Probably. Did you voice your resentment at the end of it? Probably not. So there's one person in an argument or in a conflict that tends to people please, tends to collapse and acquiesces to the other one's needs, wants, desires. And the other person, now this is not good or bad, it's just what happens. And the other person is the one that tends to bulldoze. Their emotions get the best of them, they coerce or manipulate to get their way. Now, the art of a beautiful collaboration, my friends, is the idea that we are going to come to a healthy agreement, right? You will have an open communication where both feelings are understood, where everyone feels heard in a very deep way, where there is a focus on finding a common ground, where there is an effort to try and understand and perhaps even validate this different viewpoints. This part is hard because we don't have time, especially if you have kids or if you are in the middle of a meeting and you're meeting with your boss and there's so many other things happening, or you're meeting with a co-founder, or you are meeting with a friend, a sibling, somebody that you love. It's not always available that you're going to fully understand everyone's viewpoints. But if you're listening or watching to this, perhaps the first thing to ask yourself is, how do I show up in conflict? Do I tend to bulldoze or do I tend to collapse? Do I tend to coerce or do I tend to avoid. And we talked a little bit about what your trauma response is, but another way to think about it is, what is our attachment styles? And the meaning, the key aspects, we just talked about the key aspects of collaboration. So we need to have an open communication where everyone feels heard, seen, understood, right? We're focusing on a common ground. And there is a dedicated effort to validate everyone's viewpoints. And lastly, the solutions to a collaboration after a conflict is that everyone's ideas are thoughtfully considered. Essentially, it's a win-win for everybody, right? Now, coercion, on the other hand, in conflicts represents a forceful approach where only one party will impose their will on other people through pressure, manipulation, or threats. Now, I think about this growing up, and I definitely know I had my elder, amazing caregivers, either my dad, my aunt, I remember doing this, my Lola, who it was their way or the highway. And I was definitely the rebellious teenager. I definitely got into a lot of conflict, a lot of fights, trying to push forth to be heard and seen. And when I wasn't, I would lie. I would lie that I was going out on a date, or I would lie to get my way. I would study, quote unquote, at the library, right? And I know that a lot of you from immigrant households probably did the same thing. This is an outright approach because you feel like that is the only way that you have, because either your needs or your desires weren't met, or it didn't feel safe to express yourself fully. And so either you coerce by not doing it at all or completely withdrawing, which is also another sign of avoidant attachment. Now, the third thing that I wanted to bring here is collapse. Now, someone will collapse in a conflict or when trying to collaborate. And if we're thinking about collapse, okay, so if coercion is there's a power imbalance, there is a one sided resolution, there's a short term conflict, which someone gets their way, but it may cause long term damage, which is lack of trust, lack of respect, and resentment. And of course, the final thing with a coercion is it often leads to feelings of dissatisfaction. In a collapse, what's happening is one person gives up or withdrawing from the agreement. So they're like, yeah, whatever you say. Whatever you say, okay, fine. And sometimes if you're thinking about this, well, in relationship, you have to pick your battles, right? Like if my son or my daughter says something and the other day we were walking down the road, my daughter spilled water on the sidewalk and she starts to lick the water off the sidewalk like a dog because she saw a dog doing it. She's 3. And she looks at me and she wanted to see my reaction. And in the beginning, because I literally saw this, I was like, what are you doing? And it yelled out of my mouth. And then I look at her and she's like laughing. She thinks it's silly. And she starts licking the water off the floor. And so I pick her up and I said, and then I just made a joke. She was laughing. And my split second moment, I was furious. And then I'm like, oh, I didn't know we had a dog here. How did that taste? And of course, she thought it was funny. She was giggling and it diffused it. However, you have to pick your battles. Later on that night, we had a battle about bedtime, and that's when Mama had to put her foot down. And I said, there is absolutely no screens right now. We are going to bed. It is way past your bedtime. So now, this is a context with kids, and yes, it was a very funny situation looking back at it. But right when I was there, I was livid for that split second, and I wanted to make sure that she's safe. The other thing that comes up when we are in conflict is we have to be able to pick our battles. Right. And so there has to be a climate of trust and open communication. If there isn't a climate of trust, if you're doing this with, let's just say, somebody that you respect and admire, you also want to be able to, if you are coming from a place that's triggered, if you are coming up from a place that's heated, where the argument is big and you lost your temper, you have to be able to self-regulate. You have to be able to manage your emotions. And what does that look like? All right, well, breathing is one of them, going out for a walk, being able to watch something funny, but you should have zero charge when you're coming back in. So this is for you to take ownership and notice, because this is the emotional regulation Olympics. When you are having conflict management or any sort of conflict with another person, you probably are able to do this better with somebody that is not the closest person to you, because guess what? We react with the closest people to us. And so I shared this before in one of our episodes in navigating conflicts with a love partner, but even with friendships, even with people you care about, your caregivers, your mom, your dad, aunt, uncle, siblings, you want to be able to have a safe word that when things arise or when things get so heated and you cannot come to common ground, and knowing what your fighting style is. Are you one to fawn, meaning collapse? Are you one to fight, meaning coerce? Are you one to fly away, meaning completely dissociate and be avoidant in their attachment style and completely withdraw from it altogether? So figure out what that fighting style is. That is so, so important. And the idea is you have to be able to trust and know that the other person you're having a conflict with is not the worst person in the world. They are not trying to get you. Or maybe they are, but maybe they're not. Maybe they're not. Maybe they are just feeling really big about this. The next thing that I really want to bring attention to is first seek to understand. It's the oldest proverb. I know somebody has said it before me. I'm not the one who said this, but seek to understand, then be understood. When we are seeking to understand, has that person been resourced? Is that person resourced to even have that conversation today? Did that person have a fight with somebody else? Did that person have a long day? Did that person eat? Did that person go to the gym? Did that person watch a funny video? Did that person sleep well the night before you are bringing something up? And while this is so wild and you have to be able to make sure that you yourself are also being heard, your desires and needs and wants are also valid, you've got to make sure both parties are also in the right mindset. And that is with a healthy approach to navigating conflict. Now, let's talk a little bit about attachment styles for a second, because attachment styles, if we think about it, there's so many books that have been written about attachment styles. One of them is called Attached, which we will link in the show notes. It's a beautiful book. We've had other people on the show to talk about different attachment styles. Dr. Lalita with a book, High Functioning Anxiety, she gave us a lowdown on attachment styles. But basically, these are styles that are developed in early childhood. And therapists use this model a lot because they really have a big influence on how we maintain relationships throughout our lives. Some of us might have more of an anxious attachment style. Now, people with this, and I'm definitely, I go towards the anxious attachment style because they exhibit a deep fear of abandonment, which we all know, and rejection. They often seek close and intimate relationships, but feel insecure about their partner's feelings and commitment. This insecurity drives them to seek constant reassurance and closeness from their partners. It could be also with other friends, family members, people, and sometimes it can feel overwhelming to other people, right? And so I sometimes now know this with my kids. When I haven't seen them or if I was away on a trip, I will literally pick them up like they're babies, and they're still small, but I will tend to smother them because I'm like, oh my gosh, mama loves you. And, I've missed them. And now my kids are like, mama, that's too much. And so, but I like to be that smothering bear, but I get it. Now I'm like, oh, okay. All right. All right. Slow your horse, slow your horse. So I can call myself forward in it. And we joke around with this, but for those now in attachment, okay, in anxious attachment, especially when we're dealing with conflict. Now, those who have an anxious attachment style, they are extremely sensitive to any signs of distancing or disinterest from friends, family, and it might be misinterpreted or exaggerated, meaning that they might come up with a story in their mind about, hey, why didn't you call me back? Or, oh my gosh, you don't want to be my friend anymore. Or did that thing that I said, did that offend you in any way? So they might be super sensitive to those cues. So just be careful with that. They might have some emotional volatility, especially during conflicts. They might be really big and bold and passionate. They might have anxiety and fear that can come up, and a rapid escalation of emotions. They may also exhibit clingy behavior. This is an attempt to resolve conflicts. They may cling more towards their partner, feeling that conflict could potentiate a breakup or a lack of communication. Now, let's get into the avoidant style. Now, with the avoidant attachment style, these typically maintain their independence and self sufficiency excessively. They often perceive closeness and intimacy as a threat to their autonomy, and they are super uncomfortable with emotional closeness. Now, notice if that is you or anybody that you know. They tend to withdraw or distance themselves in situations that require emotional engagement. Now, this is huge because characteristics of people who have an avoidant attachment style, especially in conflict, and I've had these. I have these people in my life, in my immediate circle. They tend to withdraw during conflicts. They tend to withdraw or shut down emotionally, and it's their purest defense mechanism to protect their independence because they value freedom and independence to avoid vulnerability. Minimizing closeness. They may minimize the importance of the relationship so that they can manage their discomforting feelings because they equate that with dependency and intimacy, and that's really scary for them. And they avoid a resolution. So they often avoid confrontation. They often avoid resolving conflicts directly, which can lead to unresolved issues down the line and long term resentment. So this is huge because if you have a partner, if you yourself are have avoidant attachment, you might have resentment because you are afraid of conflict. You are not able to address your emotional needs, desires, wants, and say, hey, this is what I am expecting. So you instead just avoid. Now, these in conflict resolution, anxiously attached folks might actually push for a very quick resolution because they want to resolve it right away. And avoidant might delay or ignore big conflicts and they might shove it under a rug, right? So you've probably heard of the saying, shove it under a rug. Well, that's what avoidant attachment styles do. And anxious attachment styles, they might be more likely to express their emotions openly and excessively. And avoidant might, again, shove it under the rug. They might suppress their truest desires and feelings, or they might appear completely indifferent, leading to misunderstandings. So if you've ever heard, well, you don't care about me, you don't care about this, or maybe you don't care about this friendship, it's because perhaps the avoidant, and sometimes they do this subconsciously. So if you're listening to this or watching this and saying, oh my gosh, this is what my partner does, or oh my gosh, this is what my parent does, or you can see yourself in this, notice what can you do? All right. So you want to be able to first acknowledge each person's way, their attachment style, and how you can best serve for the greater good of the relationship. And this is the big thing we also learned in our retreat this year, which was we're doing things for the greater good of the relationship. So if you say something like, I'm just coming from a place of love, I'm coming from a place because I really care about this relationship. And it deeply pains me when X. So, A, what I just demonstrated there was your truest and purest intentions. That's number one. Number two, you are sharing your needs and your desires. It really hurts me when, and it makes me feel like I don't have equal priority if you are working on these things without me, right? So you're sharing your emotional needs and how you're actually feeling about something instead of just saying, oh, well, I'm so frustrated you didn't do the dishes, or I'm so frustrated you didn't get to look at the itinerary that I put together. You could say, I deeply feel unseen when I gave you something and it seems like you didn't take the time to look at it. So you're getting into the underbelly of the emotions that are actually kind of causing the frustration or causing the irritation or causing the conflict to arise, the trigger. And so when you can adjust to these attachment driven behaviors, then the people that you're navigating conflict with, I bet they'll have a better way of really understanding you, and then you guys can grow together. So this is really insightful for so many of us when we're navigating through. The other thing that we can actually do is have a safe word, right? I've said this before. I'll keep saying this. I think that is the biggest relationship booster for any sort of relationship that you have. I have this with a couple of my really close girlfriends that if we are triggered about something or if we're heightened about something, we will have a safe word. And I do this with some of my closest besties because sometimes, and they know I'm coming from a place of love, they know my styles, and they know that, and I know how sometimes they react when we're talking about certain things. And the biggest thing is to ask if somebody is emotionally dumping on you. Maybe they're just venting, okay? You don't need to solve anything, but you want to ask, hey, do you need to vent right now? Do you want me to hear you? Do you need advice? Or do you just need hugs? That's it. And this, as a friend, as a colleague, as a family member, as a love partner, this is the greatest thing that you can do, especially when you're trying to hold container for somebody else. And lastly, what I want to share with this is to be able to claim your desires and describe your emotional needs and your wants. Let's just say you and your girlfriends are planning a trip. And let's just say your girlfriend wants to go to Disneyland because she's never been and she thought, why not go with her besties? Your other girlfriend wants to go to Paris because she's never been, and why not go on a girlfriend's trip? And you all can't decide where to go. Well, you want to be able to, in a collaborative way, well, share your desires, share your emotional needs. It would make me feel like a kid again if we could just go and enjoy Disneyland and be in our best selves, but come back to our inner centers and play like little kids and be able to let go of any attachment at the end result. And that's the biggest thing. And this is for any sort of conflict, be able to let go of any attachment. And if you're thinking and watching this and you're saying, wait, Neeta, do you mean I don't fight for it? So you've got to be willing to let go, right? Remember how I said to pick your battles. So this is one. Pick your battles. There is a way to come from a place where both needs and want and desires are understood and met. Okay. What if you plan a trip with your girlfriends every year and you weigh the pros and cons of each of those trips, Paris or Disneyland, and you come up with whatever solution. And I think this is golden. Why? Because whatever the solution is, it's for the greater good of the relationship. It's for the greater good of the relationship container. And again, that your bestie, your friend, wants also the greater good with you involved. And that's the beauty of collaboration. Nobody's trying to slight you. Nobody's trying to get you. No one's trying to one up you. Again, we have all of these ideas, these past thoughts, these past stories, these past beliefs in our minds. And what if we can come from a place of a clean slate? meaning that if your bestie wronged you in a way, or she always does this, or she always takes the reins, there are no reruns. If your bestie hurt you before and she doesn't really respect you, maybe that's called a toxic relationship. Maybe that person's not for you. But if she is also committed, if that person's also committed to the greater good of your relationship as a whole, if your partner is committed to the greater good of your relationship, then to be able to let go of any attachment. And some of you might be asking, well, what if my parents aren't there for the greater good? What if they just want to control me? What if they just want to, they always have to have a hold? Again, there's a way to have these shares, be able to state your desire, state your emotional need. What would be really cool is if, and acknowledge where they're coming from. Acknowledge, hey, I totally get you are so overprotective, Mimi. I totally get that you didn't get a chance to do this with your parents growing up. And this is what I'd love to do. And I really want to honor you as well. So, see, you're honoring and you're making them feel seen, as well as being able to honor yourselves. When we are having this conflict, many times we go into our own cocoon and we think we are being wronged and we think me, 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 me. And I want you to think, how else can we operate in this relationship container where there's two people? So we talked a lot today about navigating conflict, what to do in the different attachment styles. So avoidant attachment, anxious attachment, and the 5 trauma responses, as well as what it looks like to fully collaborate in relationship. What tends to happen when you are coercive and or when you collapse, and how do we have healthy solutions where all parties are acknowledged. I hope you enjoyed this solo cast. I do want to know what you think, and if there's anybody that can benefit from this, please share this episode with them. Please comment below some of your thoughts, if I should add anything for the next round. And if you are watching this on YouTube, I would so love for you to subscribe and let us know what you thought in the comments. If you're sharing this on social media, go ahead and tag us at The Brave Table and at Neeta Bhushan. I would so love your support. And if you haven't already, we would love your 5-star review. If you can screenshot your review after you've put it under iTunes, go ahead and send it to support@globalgrit.co. That is support@globalgrit.co. And I will see you next time.